Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So for today's video, I am sharing how I took a thrifted old hutch and turned it into an antiqued, gorgeous entry table. It's going to be a fun video, one you don't want to miss. I'll be sharing a lot of tips and what to look for if you're looking for a piece for your home. If you are not yet following me on Instagram, head on over and find me at Valerie Aguiar, where I share a lot of behind the scenes and fun stuff there. So this hutch I found on Facebook Marketplace, and the lady was actually just down the street from us, and she was asking $100, but I was able to talk her down to $80. So we ended up getting this little hutch for $80. And the reason why I liked this hutch was because I automatically knew I would take that top piece off, but what I really loved about it was that it was pretty simple and clean lines. It doesn't have a ton of like ornate detailing. Keep in mind we will take that top hutch piece off, but I just wanted to show you guys kind of some of this old vintage style furniture. It's really unique. I liked that little knob and how it had the little kind of hammered ends, but there was only one knob, so we weren't going to be able to use that. But what I really did like about this hutch was that top base part on that tabletop part is really, really thick, nice piece of wood, which to me, when things are really thick and kind of dense like that, it just elevates the level of quality. For me, the saying is always true with vintage furniture: they don't make them like they used to. The thing I love about vintage furniture is it is almost always really good quality wood and sturdy wood, things that you just can't find anymore, or it will cost you an arm and a leg to find something this sturdy. So these types of pieces really do stand the test of time, which is why I like to incorporate some of these into our home. So this hutch does have kind of this little scalloped like border type thing right here on the bottom, but if you can see, it was missing one of those little covers, so you can easily see that part can be pulled off. You can add your own piece or just do without it, but that was definitely a selling point for me, that I could change that little scallop out. And of course, I love the storage. I love that the doors both worked and were in really great condition. There was also this drawer, and it had the little dividers in it. I just thought that was the cutest thing. It was probably more meant for like silverware or dining area, but it is still super cute. Another really neat detail in this piece was that the edges of that tabletop were really sanded down and kind of worn, and whoever made this cabinet specifically wanted it to be that way, and I just think it is a really kind of neat detail, and I definitely wanted to keep that look or enhance it somehow. So I recommend before starting a project or picking a piece, you really want to have a vision in mind in some type of piece that you're looking for or how you want it to look. I've always loved this antique piece in Amber Interiors entryway, so this was kind of really my inspiration for what I wanted this cabinet to look and kind of feel like. So I started by taking all of the hardware off of this hutch. There was a couple drawer pulls, a couple little knobs to pull off, and then I did detach the doors and the hinges on the doors as well. Most hardware is pretty simple on vintage pieces like this. They usually just come off with a screwdriver. I don't think I've ever encountered anything that was much more complicated than that. They kept it pretty simple. Like I said, I did remove the doors completely just so that it makes them a little bit easier to sand, and I can kind of get around all those edges and all those little creases. So for the hutch part, this one was relatively easy. Sometimes they can be a little bit more complicated, or the screws can be like hidden, so you have to really kind of look around. But in this case, the hutch part was pretty easy to remove by just taking out maybe about 5 or 6 screws. And this top piece that is now all gone will probably just be scrapped. We don't really have a use for it. Sometimes you can remove the hardware and sell it on things like eBay and things like that. People are always looking for vintage hardware, so that's an idea. But I just took my hand sander. I will link this one below. I use it for everything. And I kind of went back and forth between using an 80 grit or 100 grit sandpaper, and I ended up going with 100 grit. The 80 will completely remove like everything, and then the 100 will make you work a little bit harder, but it also leaves a little bit of that darker wood on there if you like that look. So I didn't want to remove everything completely because I did want to keep that kind of aged, worn look. If you're not that familiar with sandpaper and those types of things, if you're just getting started, there are a ton of like sandpaper guides and things on Google and Pinterest that you can look up that kind of explain what each type of sandpaper does, and it's kind of a good guide to just know what each one does, the different grits and stuff. You also don't have to sand your furniture. There is another way. If your piece of furniture has paint, you can also strip it. There are a lot of different chemicals and things you can pick up from like Home Depot, Lowe's, Ace, and it will remove paint, remove stain. A lot of people choose that way. I just choose sanding because I think it's fast and easy and a little bit less messy, I guess. So for the harder to reach places, especially places like corners or up above the top, even these little rounded edges that are not that easy to get with a hand sander, I just use a little piece of sandpaper and do this by hand. You can also use a sanding block. Just remember, you always want to sand with the grain of wood as much as you can. You never want to go against the grain. And like I said, I wanted to try and keep a little bit of that dark wood kind of peeking through, not too much, but just a little tiny bit. And for this little bottom scalloped piece, so I was able to remove 3 of those 4 screws, and that little bottom one on that little corner was giving me a heck of a time. So it was completely stripped. Like there was no way I was going to get that out, and I really wasn't going to save that piece anyway. It was kind of just scrap. So I took a hammer to it and kind of was able to hit it off and then get a wrench in there, and there it goes. And then pull the screw out with a wrench. So my plan for this little bottom piece is to either replace it or see how it looks just without it. So this is the tabletop once everything was sanded, and there was like a little oil stain on there. No matter what I did, I couldn't get it out. So I'm kind of just going to work with it, and it'll probably be covered up anyway once it's all styled and everything. But you can see how a little bit of that dark wood is peeking through right on the edges in some of the grain. I really like kind of those little dark moments coming out. I think it's a really unique detail. So there were some holes where the screws were for the hutch, and they actually have those little caps. They're like little wooden caps that kind of hide the screws. So I just am going to sand those down and replace those back in there. And for the holes that I know that I want to cover up, I'm just going to be using this wood filler. I got it in the natural color. And I know that I'm not going to be using both of the pulls. I'm going to actually change the pull to right in the center on that drawer. So when I use wood filler, I always like fill the hole and push it in really, really well. And then once it's all really filled in there, you have to really like get it compacted in there. And then once I know that it's all really pushed in there really well, I'll go over it again and just kind of add a generous amount right on the top, just so that I have kind of some extra to sand off and that it doesn't like indent inside the hole, if that makes sense. I did give these little caps just a little minor sanding. I actually really like that I kept some of that darker wood peeking through because it just looks really neat in the end result. I had several stains that I wanted to try. I sanded down both of the edges and then kept the middle part that original wood color, but from the right is one color and then right in the middle there is another color. You can kind of see that gradient look. Those are all different types of stains and different like little clear coats that I did. And yeah, they're all different. They're all really neat. But in the end, I actually really liked that natural look. So after your piece is completely sanded and wiped down, make sure all of your sanding dust is gone. I went in with the Bare Decorative Finish Wax, and this is in the color white. I just used this on another video on my channel. I wanted to keep that natural look as much as possible, and even with a coat of poly, it does kind of change the color a little bit, so I really wanted to try this. It goes on a little bit kind of greasy looking, but it dries totally matte and totally clear. You just really rub it in with like an old towel or an old cloth, and it does take a few minutes to dry, but I really like how this gave kind of an aged, whitewashed type look, but it was still clear, if that makes sense. On the back of the package, it says that it seals and protects, and I put this all over this piece, so I'm really going to see how it holds up. But what I really did like was how this piece turned out in the end, so I definitely will be using this again. They also have this same wax in a clear and also in a dark antique, and I will show you the dark antique. So here is the dark antique, and I got this at Home Depot as well. And for these little accent pieces, kind of these little dark grains and around the corners, I wanted to age it just a little bit and kind of enhance those little darker spots, just to give it a little bit more contrast, a little bit more character, and just kind of accent and enhance those little aged details. So with the dark wax going on such a light piece, I really wanted to be careful to not overdo it. So I took my little cloth and I would put a little bit on the cloth and then dab a little bit off. So I started really minimal, and then I would even wipe it off as I went, just because I didn't want it super dark. And I believe that is how you use this product anyway. You put it on, and then kind of like a rub and buff, you just keep rubbing it on, and in circular motions it really works kind of that wax into the wood or whatever you're going to be putting it on. And this was one of my favorite parts, just because you get to go shopping and pick out some little fun details. So if you've ever checked out the knobs and pulls aisle at Hobby Lobby, oh my goodness, it is definitely overload on knobs. But if you're looking for hardware, that is the place to go. There is so many different knobs and styles and pulls. There are a ton of great options for furniture pieces and things like that if you're looking to replace hardware on furniture pieces. I loved this aged brass. It was kind of imperfect, and I really liked that. They also had a matching pull. It was pretty close, so I also picked this up for the drawer pull. And for the drawer pull, I will use my drill bit and drill. I'll link this exact one for you guys down below if you're interested. But I just find a drill bit that looks like it is the same size as the screws on the back, and sometimes I am wrong. Sometimes I get the wrong size, but it's better to start smaller with a smaller drill bit than bigger. So you definitely want to kind of work your way up if it's not working like that. So I just have to change my drill bit into something a little bit bigger and then redo the holes. And I think the second time was the charm, but yeah, sometimes those drill bits can be a little tricky. If you have a pool like mine, you can also use a level and lay the level right on top before you do your holes, just to make sure that everything is level. I kind of just eyeballed mine, and it was fine. So to determine where I wanted those cabinet knobs, I just went in with a tape measure and I kind of eyeballed where I wanted them anyway, but I just measured an exact measurement so that I could make them equal on both sides. So I believe it was 1 inch down and then maybe like 1¼ inch over. It's just all preference where you want the knobs, but yeah, I kind of just eyeballed it to where I wanted them and then measured to that exact measurement. And this is how I kind of eyeball my drill bit. I don't know if there's an easier way to do this. This is just how I always do it. So I am no professional by any means. These are just the things that I've always done and the things that work for me. Adding these little decorative knobs and stuff really kind of wrap everything up and make it kind of surreal when you see everything come together. It's definitely one of my favorite parts of almost completing a project. Also, don't forget, if you don't put the back in, you can't pull on the knob. And then just to make sure that these are on tight and not going anywhere, I always like to use a wrench just to tighten everything. Make sure you don't over tighten or break them, but the wrench really helps to tighten everything up. And once we brought everything inside, my favorite part is styling everything. So this hutch is not going to be staying in our office. I just wanted to style it and kind of give you guys an idea of what it looks like all pulled together and all done. So I just added a couple things we had around the house. So the style of this little cabinet is very aged and antiqued, so I wanted to stick with that style for the decor. So if you remember how this hutch started, it was definitely rocking the 70s vibes, a little heavy, a little dark, and what we have done is lightened it, brightened it, took that heavy top piece off, updated the hardware. It's now lighter, brighter, less heavy, perfect for an entryway or a little cabinet. A piece like this is perfect for adding a little bit of interest, a little bit of vintage into your home if that is your style. This is a really great way to take an inexpensive piece and add some character into your home. I think with my vision, I came pretty close to what I had envisioned and what I was inspired to do with this piece, but by adding in all of these little decorative pieces around it, it kind of pulls it all together and makes it feel really complete. That frame back there is something that I did a quick DIY on. I may do a video on it next week among a couple other things that I'm working on, so keep an eye out for that. But if you can see what that dark wax did right around the edges of those cabinets and in some of the wood grain, it just really enhanced kind of those darker spots, but left it really subtle. So I would definitely try the wax if you haven't. I think it is a really great product. So with that, I hope this video helped or inspired you to try something new or a new DIY for your home. And with that, we'll catch you guys next time. Thanks so much for watching.